The night Evelyn Harper knocked on the door of the house she once called home, her own son looked into her eyes and said, "You don't live here anymore." It was the kind of sentence that doesn't just close a door, it quietly erases your name from the welcome mat. Rain poured over a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, turning the sidewalk into a silver river beneath the streetlights. The little gray house on Oak Hollow Lane glowed warmly from the inside, its curtains drawn tight against the storm and the world beyond. On the front porch, Evelyn's thin shoulders shook under a soaked thrift store coat, gray hair plastered to her temples. She rested one trembling hand on the door she had once helped Mark paint, back when he'd called this place our home instead of the house. Her first knock was timid, more question than demand, and the sound vanished into the rain. She waited, listening to the hum of a distant television and the faint clink of dishes inside, counting the seconds like prayers. When no one came, she knocked again, harder this time, knuckles aching against the wood. Once, she would have turned the handle and walked straight in, calling out, "It's just Mom." Back then, there had been a spare key under the mat and a standing invitation. Tonight there was only water and cold and the sinking feeling that invitations could expire. Inside, footsteps padded across the hardwood floor, and Evelyn's heart fluttered with a fragile, dangerous hope. She pictured Mark as a boy racing to answer the door whenever she came home from the late shift at the diner, arms already reaching for a hug that smelled like fryer oil and cheap coffee. She pictured Lily and Noah bursting into the hallway, pajamas and tangled hair, shouting, "Grandma," as they threw themselves at her legs, trusting she would always walk through that door. Hope, she thought, could be cruel. It always made you remember the very moments you were about to lose. The deadbolt clicked, the porch light brightened, and the door opened halfway. Mark stood framed in the doorway, late 30s now, shoulders broader, hair a little thinner at the temples as if worry had been quietly stealing it. His Ohio State hoodie was splattered with something red from dinner, and his eyes were clouded with the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep. For a second, his face went soft, recognition tugging at old habits like a hand on his sleeve. Then, like a curtain dropping on a stage, his expression hardened again, and the softness vanished. "Mom?" he said, but it sounded cautious, not welcoming, like he was testing a word he wasn't sure he still had the right to use. He did not move aside. The warm light stayed trapped behind him, spilling over his shoulders without touching her. Evelyn tried to smile through the shivering. "Hi, honey," she managed, voice rough from the cold air and the long bus ride. "I'm sorry to come by unannounced. I didn't know where else to go." The apology slipped out automatically, the way it does with people who have spent a lifetime trying not to be a burden, even to their own children. Wind drove rain across the porch, soaking the toes of her sensible shoes until her feet went numb. Evelyn hugged her worn floral tote closer, feeling the shape of her pill organizer and a single framed photo tucked safely inside, like a fragile piece of proof. "They raised the rent again," she said, words tumbling out in a rush as if they might freeze if she didn't get them out. "Then there were late fees, and then the notice. They changed the locks this afternoon. I tried the shelter, but it was full, and they turned me away at the door. I thought maybe, just for tonight, I could stay here. I'll be gone in the morning, I promise." Mark rubbed his forehead like he was trying to erase the moment. "Mom, you can't just show up like this," he muttered, glancing past her at the rain-dark street. "You should have called first. We have routines now, schedules. The kids have school in the morning." The formality in his tone stung more than the cold. Once, he had wandered into her room in the middle of the night without knocking, nightmares still clinging to him, and she had always made space, shifting her body to give him room. If this moment hits you, tell me, who would you trust when you have nowhere else to knock and no other light on in the dark? From somewhere inside, a small voice floated down the hallway. "Dad? Who is it?" Evelyn's heart lifted at the sound before she could stop it. Lily, 8 years old, braces just starting to shine when she smiled, a laugh that used to turn Sundays into holidays even when money was tight. Evelyn opened her mouth to answer, but Mark spoke first, raising his voice toward the stairs. "Just someone from the neighborhood, Lil. Go finish brushing your teeth, he called. Then, lower, to his mother, You really picked a bad time. Olivia's exhausted. The kids need stability. We can't just change everything tonight. Wachowi, have you ever watched someone shrink themselves just so they don't scare away the last scrap of hope they're holding on to? That's what Evelyn did then. She straightened her back, trying to look less fragile, less like a problem standing on his porch in borrowed shoes and a coat too thin for November. I understand, she said quickly. I don't want to disrupt anything. I can be quiet. I can sleep on the couch, or even just in a chair. You won't even know I'm here. I just can't be out there tonight. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she lowered her eyes so he wouldn't see the tears mixing with the rain. Beyond Mark's shoulder, the hallway glowed with soft lamplight that made the house look almost golden. Evelyn could see framed photos lining the wall. First days of school, a beach trip, Christmas morning stacked in time like chapters of a book she thought she was still part of. In one picture, she recognized herself on that very couch, Lily curled in her lap, both of them laughing at something off camera while torn wrapping paper covered the floor. The sight of it made her chest ache, proof that once she had belonged not just on this porch but inside the story of this house. Now she stood outside like a stranger selling something she didn't have the words for. A second pair of footsteps approached, slower and more deliberate, each one sounding like a decision. Olivia appeared beside Mark, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, leggings and an oversized sweatshirt dotted with flour from the baked ziti she'd made for dinner. She looked Evelyn up and down, taking in the soaked coat, the shaking hands, the puddle creeping toward the welcome mat. "Evelyn," she said, forcing a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "What are you doing here in this weather?" Her voice was almost kind, but there was steel braided through it, and Evelyn felt every strand. Evelyn tried to answer without sounding desperate, swallowing back the part of her that wanted to cry. "I lost my apartment today," she said simply. "The shelter's full, the buses stopped running, and I didn't know where else to go. I thought I could stay here tonight, just one night." She took a breath that rattled in her chest. "I can help with the kids, help around the house. I don't want to be in the way. I just need a dry place to close my eyes." She clung to each word like it might unlock the door a little wider. "Share your truth. Have you ever seen someone hide their pain just to make it easier for others to say yes, even when they already planned to say no?" Olivia and Mark exchanged a look, the kind that told Evelyn this conversation had already happened without her in some quiet, late-night kitchen argument. Olivia's smile faded. "We talked about this," she said quietly to her husband, but Evelyn heard every syllable like a verdict. "We can't start that again. The last time she stayed, the kids' routines were a mess and you were stressed for weeks. We said we wouldn't do it anymore." Then, louder, she added, "It's not that we don't care, Evelyn, but we have to think about what's best for the kids. This house, it isn't your responsibility anymore, and it can't be your safety net either." Evelyn's fingers tightened around the tote straps until her knuckles went white. The word "anymore" echoed in her chest, bouncing off memories of birthday parties, sleepovers, and Sunday dinners crowded around this table with bowls of mashed potatoes and cheap cola. She could feel the storm pressing in on all sides now, rain, wind, and silence closing around her like a fist. She opened her mouth to beg one last time, to remind them of every night she had stood between Mark and the world when he was small, every bill she had paid by skipping meals. But before she could speak, Olivia stepped a little closer, her next words drawing a line you can't unhear, a line that would shatter what Evelyn still believed about family and about home. The moment Olivia's words cut through the rain, Evelyn felt something inside her retreat to a place where memory still offered warmth. She didn't fight back. Not because she agreed, but because exhaustion has a way of turning even heartbreak into silence. So as the storm raged on the porch, her mind slipped backward, toward years when love had felt uncomplicated, and doors had always opened for her. She remembered the tiny apartment in Dayton where Mark had taken his first steps. The wallpaper then had been yellowed with age, and the floor creaked when the wind blew through the old window frames, but it had been theirs. just the two of them, and she had turned every corner of that place into a promise that he would grow up loved, even if money could never stretch far enough. She'd worked double shifts at the diner, walking home after midnight with tired feet and hopeful dreams. Mark used to wait up for her, even when she begged him not to. She'd step through the door to find him curled on the couch with a blanket around his shoulders, fighting sleep just so he could tell her about his day. "I stayed awake because I didn't want you to open the door alone, Mom," he once said, and that simple sentence had filled her with a pride so strong she believed nothing in the world could ever take him from her. She thought back to the cold winters, to the heater that rattled like it was held together by prayers, and to the nights when she warmed canned soup over a stove that barely lit. Mark would sit at their little table, legs dangling, watching her with those wide eyes that always made her laugh. "One day," he'd tell her, "I'll buy you a house you never have to leave." Funny how promises echo louder when they're broken. If you were in his place, would you remember the promise or find a reason to forget it? Through high school, Mark had been her shadow. He'd walk her to the bus stop on mornings she was too tired to hide it, and she'd slip folded notes into his lunchbox, small reminders that he mattered, even when the world tried to convince him otherwise. When he got accepted into Ohio State on a scholarship, Evelyn had cried in the middle of her shift, right between refilling coffees for the night crew. They were tears of pride, of relief, of every sacrifice suddenly making sense. She'd helped him move into his dorm, her heart swelling as she watched him carry boxes full of borrowed dreams. The halls smelled like freedom and cheap pizza, and Evelyn had stood there pretending she wasn't afraid of losing the part of him that still needed her. "Call me if you ever need anything," she'd told him, "even if it's just someone to listen." He hugged her tighter than he had in years, and she believed, truly believed, that no distance or success could weaken the bond they had built over decades of survival. Then came Olivia. The first time Evelyn met her, the girl had been polite but cautious, like someone examining a room before deciding whether to stay. Olivia dressed well, spoke confidently, and carried herself with the grace of someone who had never had to choose between rent and groceries. Evelyn liked her, or at least she tried. She wanted to be welcoming. But there was something in the way Olivia watched her, as if evaluating the cost of including her in their lives. The cracks formed slowly, the way storms begin as a faint wind. Olivia started limiting visits. Then she stopped inviting Evelyn to birthday parties unless it was convenient. And little by little, Evelyn found herself becoming a guest in moments she once would have been central to. Even holidays became quieter, until one Christmas Eve she found herself eating microwave turkey alone in a one-bedroom apartment, watching snow fall outside a window no one else ever looked through. Still, she kept showing up. She bought gifts for the kids, wrote heartfelt birthday letters, called every Sunday even when calls went straight to voicemail. She tried, because that's what mothers do. They try until trying becomes a language spoken only by their hearts. But every year, the distance grew, and she started to wonder whether she was loving them more than they loved her back. "What's the hardest goodbye you've ever faced?" She remembered a moment, small but unforgettable. 3 years ago she had arrived early to surprise Lily at her school talent show. She had even made a little bouquet of grocery store flowers. But when she walked into the auditorium, she saw Olivia stiffen. Mark had pulled her aside and whispered, "Mom, we weren't expecting you." They'd seated her in the back, behind a pillar, as if love needed permission to enter a room. Lily hadn't even known she was there until hours later, when Evelyn finally worked up the courage to wave. Now, as she stood on the porch drenched and shaking, she realized how many steps she had taken toward them over the years, and how many steps they had taken back. Mark wasn't cruel. He was overwhelmed. Olivia wasn't heartless. She was protective of a world she feared Evelyn might complicate. But intentions didn't keep you warm when the rain soaked through to your bones. Evelyn blinked against the storm and tried to focus on Mark's face. For a second, a single fragile second, she saw the boy who used to wait up for her at night. She saw the child who once cried when she missed a school play because her shift had run late. She saw the son who had promised her a home she would never lose. That memory flickered inside her like a candle in the wind, and the wind was strong tonight. Her voice trembled as she whispered his name. "Mark, honey, please, just one word, please," heavy with years of sacrifices, hopes, and silent grief. It wasn't just a request. It was the last remaining thread between mother and son, stretched thinner than ever. Mark swallowed hard. His jaw tightened. His eyes shifted away from hers. He took a breath, the kind that comes before a decision you can't take back. And then, from inside the house, another voice called out. A voice Evelyn hadn't expected to hear. A voice that changed everything. The voice drifted down the hallway with the hushed weight of someone who wasn't supposed to speak at that moment. "Mark, is everything okay?" It was soft, older, familiar, but not Evelyn's, and when the figure stepped into view, the air on the porch turned colder than the rain pouring around her. Evelyn blinked, struggling to make sense of who she was seeing. A woman, about Evelyn's age, maybe a few years younger, walked toward the doorway, tying the belt of a plush beige robe. Her hair was damp from a fresh shower, and she carried herself with the relaxed comfort of someone who clearly belonged in the home. She looked at Mark with a raised brow, then at Olivia, then finally at Evelyn, confusion settling onto her face like a shadow. Evelyn's breath hitched. She knew that face. She had seen it before, in photos Mark had shared years ago. It was Janet Morris, her former neighbor, a woman who had once babysat Mark when he was 10, a woman Evelyn hadn't seen in more than a decade, a woman Evelyn never expected to find standing inside her son's home, wearing a robe she likely kept in the guest bathroom. Mark cleared his throat. "Janet, it's nothing, just dealing with something." But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Olivia stepped in quickly, her smile tightening. "Janet came by to help with the kids while I worked today. She's been staying for dinner once in a while." Once in a while. But the way Janet leaned casually against the hallway wall told Evelyn this wasn't a once-in-a-while situation. This was routine, familiar, comfortable, the kind of comfort Evelyn herself used to have here, back when she was the one who tucked the kids in, folded their laundry, and cooked meals when Olivia was exhausted. Evelyn's stomach twisted. "I didn't know you were still close," she murmured. Janet offered a polite smile tinged with something unreadable. "I've just been helping where I can. The kids adore me, and Mark and Olivia have enough on their plate." She paused, eyes drifting to Evelyn's soaked coat. "Oh dear, you're drenched." Something inside Evelyn cracked, not because of what Janet said, but because at that moment Lily came running down the stairs, her hair in braids, still damp from her bath. "Grandma Janet, I finished brushing." Grandma Janet. The words hit Evelyn harder than the storm. Her knees nearly buckled. For years, she had tried to earn the title of grandmother. She'd brought gifts, attended events, offered help, loved those kids with everything she had left. And now, standing soaked and trembling on the porch in the cold November rain, she listened to her granddaughter give that title to someone else. Lily finally noticed her, blinking in confusion. "Daddy? Who's that?" Not Grandma. Not even Grandma Evelyn. Just that. Mark hesitated, searching for a gentle answer. But Olivia stepped in. "Sweetie, she's just someone Daddy used to know." Used to know. It was astonishing how 4 small words could erase a lifetime. Evelyn felt her vision blur, whether from tears or rain she wasn't sure. The weight of years pressed on her shoulders, years of tucking Mark into bed, years of scraped knees and birthday cakes and late-night fevers, years of believing that love built foundations too strong to be washed away. "If this moment hits you," the narrator whispered inside the story, "tell me, who would you trust when people replace you without ever telling you why?" Evelyn took a shaky step back, her heel slipping slightly on the wet porch. She hugged her tote bag to her chest as if it were armor. I didn't mean to cause trouble," she whispered. "I just needed a place to stay. Just for tonight." Janet's expression softened. but not in the way Evelyn needed. It was pity, gentle, polite, distant, the kind you offer a stranger outside a grocery store. "Maybe you should try the community shelter downtown," she said softly. "They take in women your age. I can give you the phone number if you'd like." Olivia nodded quickly. "That's a good idea. They're better equipped for situations like this." Situations like this. As if Evelyn were a problem to be redirected, Mark finally spoke. "Mom, you should go there. We can't do this tonight. The kids need stability." "And Janet's already helping enough as it is." Evelyn stared at him, rain sliding across her cheeks like melted sorrow. "Do you really mean that, Mark?" she asked. "After everything?" Mark looked down. "It's just complicated." A gust of wind slammed rain against the house, and Evelyn realized she could no longer feel her hands. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying desperately not to fall apart in front of them. "What about the promise?" she whispered. "The one you made when you were a boy?" Mark looked up sharply, guilt flickering across his features, but only for a moment. Before he could answer, Noah appeared at the top of the stairs, holding a tablet. "Dad, Grandma Janet, can you help me?" "The video won't load." Grandma Janet. Again. Effortless. Permanent. Evelyn exhaled a broken breath, and something in her face shifted. Not anger, not despair. Resolve. She straightened her spine, wiped rain from her eyes, and took one slow step backward off the porch. "I understand," she whispered. "I won't trouble you any more." The porch light flickered in the storm, casting long shadows behind Mark, Olivia, and Janet as they stood framed in the doorway. But Evelyn didn't see them. She saw instead the long, dark street behind her, the rain-soaked path that stretched toward an unknown night. She turned away, ready to walk into the storm, her heart cracking with each step. But then, just as she reached the edge of the driveway, a car pulled up slowly beside the house, headlights cutting through the rain, and the person who stepped out changed everything. The car door opened with a slow creak that cut through the storm like a warning. Evelyn froze mid-step, rain dripping from her coat, her breath sharp in her chest. Headlights illuminated the driveway, refracting off puddles and casting a white glow across her trembling silhouette. For a moment, no one moved. Not Evelyn, not the figure stepping out, not the family watching from the warmth of the doorway. Then the door slammed shut, and a familiar voice rose above the downpour. "Evelyn? Evelyn Harper? Is that you out here?" Her heart stuttered. She hadn't heard that voice in years. Through the rain, an elderly man in his late 70s hurried toward her with surprising speed. His silver hair was plastered to his forehead, and his heavy winter coat swung open as he moved. A cane dangled from his wrist by a strap. He wasn't using it, too shocked to remember it existed. It was Richard Callahan, her old landlord, her old friend, the man who had once promised her, "You'll never be alone as long as I'm around," the man she thought she'd lost the day she moved away from Dayton. Evelyn blinked hard, unsure if the storm was playing tricks on her mind. "Richard," she whispered. He reached her in seconds, gripping her shoulders gently but firmly. "My God," he murmured, his eyes wide with horror. "You're drenched. What on earth are you doing out here?" For the first time that night, Evelyn felt the strength of another human touch, a touch that didn't pull away, or hesitate, or weigh the cost of caring. It made her knees weak. I didn't have anywhere else to go," she murmured, voice cracking. Richard shook his head in disbelief, then turned sharply toward the house. The porch light cast a warm glow over Mark, Olivia, and Janet, still standing, watching, not one of them stepping forward. Richard's jaw tightened, his eyes locked on Mark. "Is this your mother?" he demanded, voice booming over the storm. Mark swallowed. "Richard, this is—" "I asked you a question," Richard snapped. "Is this your mother?" Mark nodded slowly. "Yes, but—" "There is no but," Richard fired back. The rain fell harder, as if the sky itself wanted to listen. Richard stepped closer to Mark, the years in his gaze carving judgment deeper than any anger could. What kind of man leaves his own mother standing in the rain? What kind of son watches her suffer while he stays warm inside? Olivia stiffened. With all respect, this is a family matter. Family? Richard cut in. Then why is she out here alone? Why is a 73-year-old woman soaked to the bone on a stormy night begging for a place to sleep? Silence fell heavier than the rain. Janet stepped forward timidly. We didn't mean— Of course you didn't mean, Richard snapped. Neglect isn't always intentional, but it's still neglect. Inside the house, Lily and Noah watched wide-eyed from the stairs. Evelyn's presence, her suffering, was no longer a whispered inconvenience, but a truth exposed under the glare of headlights and moral outrage. Richard turned back to Evelyn, and the hard edge in his face melted into sorrow. Let's get you in my car. I'll take you somewhere warm. Evelyn shook her head faintly. I don't want to cause any trouble. You aren't causing trouble, Richard said firmly. You're reminding these people what responsibility looks like. Evelyn's lips trembled. She felt the pull of the porch, the home she'd once known, and the pull of Richard's hand, offering something she hadn't received in far too long. Unconditional care. If you were in her place, the narrator asked softly through the story, would you step back into the storm, or finally accept someone's outstretched hand? Evelyn hesitated, still glancing back at her son. Mark, she whispered, one last time. Mark opened his mouth, searching for words, searching for courage, searching for a backbone that had gone missing years ago. Instead, Janet rested a hand on his arm, and Olivia stepped just slightly in front of him. That was the moment Evelyn understood. Not a single person on that porch intended to move toward her. Not one. Her heart crumpled. Richard saw it happen. He placed an arm around her shoulders. Come on, Evelyn. You're coming with me. She let herself lean into him as they walked toward the car. Her tote bag thumped softly against her leg with each step, a reminder of the life she was carrying in scraps. Mark stood frozen in the doorway, shame creeping up his neck like rising water. Lily tugged at his shirt. Daddy, is she okay? He didn't answer. He couldn't. Richard opened the passenger door and carefully guided Evelyn inside. The warm air hit her face, and her trembling eased for the first time in hours. As Richard closed the door, he turned back toward the porch one last time, his eyes burning with fury. You should be ashamed, he said quietly. Then he slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The car rolled down the driveway, tires slicing through rainwater as Evelyn looked back at the house, the silhouette of her son growing smaller, the porch light dimming behind her. She whispered a single sentence under her breath, meant for no one but the storm. I never thought love could look away from me. But as the car approached the intersection, Richard reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something Evelyn never expected him to carry, something that would change the entire direction of her story. The object Richard pulled from his coat pocket glinted under the dashboard light, a folded envelope worn at the edges, sealed with a strip of tape that had yellowed over time. He placed it gently on Evelyn's lap, his hands trembling slightly. I was on my way to find you, he said, before the storm got this bad. Evelyn stared at the envelope as if it were something fragile enough to break just by looking at it. For me? She whispered. Richard nodded. I should have given it to you weeks ago, but I didn't know how. His voice cracked, just a little, enough to reveal that whatever rested inside that envelope carried weight he wasn't sure she could bear. The car hummed with heat, warming her trembling fingers, yet a shiver ran through her, not from cold, but from dread. Richard, what is this? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled the car onto the main road, windshield wipers slicing through sheets of rain. Streetlights flickered past like memories she wasn't ready to revisit. Finally, he said, It's from your sister. Evelyn's breath caught. Her world tilted. My sister? Richard nodded. From Margaret. The name hit like a blow. Margaret Hayes, her estranged sister, her once best friend, the woman who had raised Evelyn after their parents died, the one she hadn't seen since the fight that tore their family apart 15 years ago. I thought she never wanted to speak to me again, Evelyn whispered. She didn't, Richard said softly. Not for a long time. But people change when time starts to run out. Evelyn gripped the envelope tighter. Time running out. Richard hesitated. The air thickened. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel. Then he said the words that shattered her. She passed away last month, Evelyn. The envelope slipped from her hands and fell to the floor. The world blurred. The sound of the rain became a distant roar. Her chest constricted as if her ribs were closing in on her heart. No, she whispered. No, she can't. She can't be gone. Tears spilled down her cheeks, fast and hot, cutting through the lingering cold on her skin. Richard, I didn't get to apologize. I didn't get to tell her I'm sorry. Richard pulled over on the side of the road, hazard lights blinking through the storm like a heartbeat. Evelyn, he said gently, turning toward her, Margaret forgave you before she died. That letter, it's everything she never said out loud, everything she wished she had. Evelyn shook her head, hands covering her face. I should have called. I should have gone to see her. I let too much time slip away. If you've ever ignored a warning your heart tried to give you, the narrator murmured through the moment, you understand this pain. Her shoulders trembled with sobs she couldn't hold back. All the years she thought she'd have, gone. All the conversations she replayed in her mind, too late. All the love she'd once believed unbreakable, buried without her. Richard reached down, picked up the envelope, and placed it back in her hands. She wanted you to have this, he said. Tonight. Evelyn ran her thumb over the tape seal. The weight of the past pressed down on her like a stone. She was afraid to open it, afraid it would make Margaret's death real. She finally managed in a trembling voice, Richard, why did she write to me? After everything? Because she knew, he said softly, that you'd been carrying guilt that didn't belong to you. And because she wanted to leave you something before she left this world. Evelyn wiped her eyes, but the tears kept coming. I don't deserve anything from her. You deserved more than what life gave you, Richard murmured. Margaret understood that at the end. The rain eased slightly, tapping gently against the roof like a tired lullaby. Evelyn looked down at the envelope. It felt heavy, not in weight, but in meaning. The kind of meaning that rewrites the story of a lifetime. Images flashed in her mind, the two sisters running barefoot in the yard, sharing secrets under blankets during thunderstorms, laughing until their stomachs hurt, crying together when life felt too heavy. And then, the silence. The years swallowed by pride, misunderstanding, and the kinds of wounds people don't talk about because they hurt too much to name. How did she die? Evelyn whispered. Richard hesitated, and that hesitation broke her all over again. Cancer, he said. She fought as long as she could. She asked for you toward the end. Evelyn pressed the envelope to her chest, as if it were the last warm thing in the world. And I wasn't there. Richard reached across the console and took her hand, squeezing gently. You weren't there then, but you're here now, and she left something for you to carry forward. Evelyn closed her eyes, letting the grief flood her until she could barely breathe. The car's heater blew warm air, but inside her chest, everything felt cold and splintered. She finally spoke through tears. Please, just take me anywhere but back there. I can't face that house again tonight. Richard nodded. You're coming to my place. You're safe with me. As he signaled to pull back onto the road, the envelope on her lap seemed to vibrate with the weight of her sister's final words. Evelyn glanced down at it, almost ready to break the seal, almost ready to face the truth she had avoided for 15 long years. But just as she slid her thumb under the tape, Richard's phone began to ring, loud, urgent, and the name flashing on the screen made his entire expression change. He looked at Evelyn, eyes wide, terrified, as he whispered, "Oh God, not tonight." Richard's hand shook as he grabbed the phone from the dashboard mount. The name pulsed on the screen in bright white letters, Columbus General Hospital. His breath hitched. Evelyn felt a cold ripple of fear move through the warm car. Richard answered with a trembling, "Hello?" His voice dropped lower, tighter. "This is Richard Callahan." There was a pause, long enough for Evelyn to hear only rain and the faint, distant sound of hospital machines filtering through the speaker. Then Richard's shoulders sank. "Yes, doctor, I understand. I'm on my way." He ended the call slowly, like someone afraid the truth might spill out the moment his thumb left the screen. Evelyn leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. "Richard, what happened?" He stared ahead for several seconds before he spoke. "It's Margaret's daughter," he said. "Your niece, Anna." Evelyn felt her heart stop. "Anna? But she's only in her 40s. Richard nodded stiffly. "She collapsed at work. They've taken her into emergency care. And she asked for you." Evelyn blinked. The words made no sense. "Me? But she hasn't spoken to me in years." Richard's expression softened. "She and Margaret reconciled before she passed. And Anna saw the letter. She knows everything now. She knows the truth." "The truth?" Evelyn echoed. Her voice quivered. Richard turned his headlights back onto the slick road, his jaw tight with urgency. "There's more in that envelope than you realize." Evelyn clutched it closer. Something inside her, fragile and cracking, felt a spark of hope flicker. A connection she thought had died with Margaret might still be alive somewhere, reaching for her even in the darkness. "Richard, take me to her," Evelyn said softly. He nodded and pulled back onto the road, tires hissing through puddles. "We'll get there as fast as we can." The night swallowed the car as they sped toward the hospital. Streetlights streaked across the windshield like ghosts of memories, each one reminding Evelyn of the years she had lost, years she never stopped longing to reclaim. She pressed the envelope to her chest. "Do you think she'll want to see me, after everything?" Richard didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned down the heater slightly, giving her a gentle glance. "You'd be surprised how people reach for love when they finally know where it came from." A soft warmth spread in her chest. Tender, hesitant, hope, a dangerous hope. As the storm eased, so did Evelyn's trembling. For the first time all night she felt something other than abandonment or grief. She felt needed, wanted, not by Mark, not by Olivia, not by the family that had shut her out, but by someone connected to her deepest past. Someone who might help her understand the truth inside the envelope she still feared opening. "If you were in her shoes," the narrator whispered gently, "would you cling to this fragile hope, or push it away after being hurt for so long?" Evelyn looked out the window at the darkened city rushing past. "Richard, thank you. For coming. For finding me. For not giving up." He smiled faintly. "People who know your heart never give up on you, Evelyn. That's the truth I wish you had been shown earlier tonight." She blinked back tears. Not of pain, but of relief. A small relief. A beginning. Richard turned onto the highway ramp. "We'll be there soon," he assured her. But before they reached the hospital, a sudden flash of blue and red lit the inside of the car. Richard slowed as an ambulance tore across the overpass above them. Sirens screaming into the night. Another ambulance followed. Then another. Evelyn's breath caught. She clutched the envelope so tightly the paper bent beneath her fingers. "Richard," she whispered, "is that for Anna?" He swallowed, eyes fixed on the road, knuckles white around the steering wheel. "I don't know," he said, but his voice told her he feared the answer. Just as they reached the exit for Columbus General, Richard's phone lit up again. Same number, same hospital. He answered with a trembling hand. "Doctor," he breathed. The voice on the other end spoke for only a few seconds, but those seconds knocked the breath from Richard's lungs and sent a chill through Evelyn's bones. He turned to her slowly, too slowly, his face pale, his lips parted as if the words hurt to say. "Evelyn, they found something else, something in Margaret's belongings." He held the phone out to her. "Something meant only for you." The phone in Richard's hand felt heavier than any object its size should. Evelyn stared at it, her pulse thudding in her ears like distant thunder. "For me?" she whispered, barely able to form the words. Richard nodded. "The doctor said it was locked inside a small wooden box, with your name carved on the lid." A tremor spread through Evelyn's chest. "My name?" "Yes," Richard said quietly. "They didn't open it. They said, Margaret left instructions. Only you're allowed to." Evelyn pressed a trembling palm to her heart. She pictured Margaret's hands, steady, capable, always better at carving, crafting, creating. If Margaret had carved Evelyn's name into a box, then whatever waited inside wasn't casual. It was intentional, heavy, personal. "Richard, what could it be?" she asked. His voice softened. "Only you and Margaret ever understood the weight of your childhood. Maybe she wanted to give you the truth she couldn't speak while she was alive." Evelyn felt the world narrow around her. Childhood. The word alone sent a shiver through her. Outside the car window, the storm had stopped entirely. The air felt too still, too expectant, like the city itself was holding its breath. She looked down at the envelope in her lap. The box. The envelope. The niece, asking for her. Every thread of her past was pulling itself into the present, all at once. She swallowed hard. "Richard, I don't know if I can open this." "You can," he said firmly. "Evelyn, whatever Margaret left for you, she wanted you to have peace. She wanted to free you from the guilt you've carried since the day you left home." Evelyn closed her eyes. 15 years. 15 years since that night. The night she and Margaret had their last fight. The night everything went wrong. Her voice trembled. "Do you think she forgave me?" Richard slowed the car as they approached a red light. "I know she did. She wouldn't have gone through the trouble of preparing all this otherwise." Evelyn let out a shaky breath, but deep in her heart a memory stirred, sharp, painful, unfinished. The last thing Margaret had said to her, the last thing Evelyn had screamed back, the reason she'd never returned. "I abandoned her," Evelyn whispered. "I walked away when she needed me." Richard shook his head. "You walked away from a fire that neither of you knew how to put out. That's different." But Evelyn wasn't convinced. Some wounds don't fade with time. They deepen. She opened her eyes again, watching the hospital approach through the windshield. Its tall glass windows glowed in the night like a beacon, like truth waiting at the end of a long, lonely road. "She said Anna is awake enough to talk," Richard murmured. "Barely, but she asked for you by name." That sentence sparked something inside Evelyn that felt dangerously close to hope. "She remembers me. She remembers everything," Richard said gently. "Margaret told her the real story, the one you don't know." Evelyn's breath caught. "The real story?" Richard nodded. "Yes, the truth about why she pushed you away. The truth about that night. The night. The night she had spent years trying not to remember." The traffic light turned green. Richard pressed the gas gently. The hospital grew larger and larger as they approached, its glowing sign slicing through the darkness. "If you were her," the narrator whispered deeply, "would you keep driving toward the truth or turn back to a life built on silence?" Evelyn gripped the envelope so tightly her knuckles whitened. "I need to know," she said. "Whatever it is, I need to know." Richard nodded. "Then we go in together." He pulled into the hospital parking lot, guiding the car carefully into a space under a dim street lamp. The rain had left streaks across the windshield like fingerprints of the storm. He put the car in park and turned to her fully. His voice was low, steady. "She asked for you with her last clear moment. She said there was something she couldn't leave this world without you understanding." Evelyn blinked back tears. "What if it's something terrible?" Richard took her hand. "Then you'll face it. And you won't face it alone." She nodded slowly, wiping her cheeks with her sleeve. The envelope lay across her lap like a fragile piece of fate. She lifted it again, fingers trembling at the seal. "Should I open it now?" she whispered. Richard's gaze softened. "It's your choice." She hesitated, breath shaking. Then she slid her thumb beneath the tape. One slow movement, one breath at a time. The seal lifted. She opened the envelope and pulled out a single folded sheet of paper. Her vision blurred as she unfolded it. At the top, in Margaret's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "The truth you never knew." Evelyn felt her pulse quicken. The words swam before her eyes, but before she could read a single line, a nurse burst through the hospital entrance and rushed toward their car, waving frantically. "Are you Evelyn Harper?" she shouted. Evelyn froze. Richard's eyes widened. The nurse reached the passenger door, breathless, rain-soaked, urgency burning in her eyes. "You need to come inside," she said. Right now." She swallowed hard, then added, "Anna just woke up, and she's asking for you by name. She says she remembers everything." The automatic doors whooshed open as Evelyn stepped inside, the hospital's bright fluorescent lights shocking her eyes after the dark, storm-soaked night. The air smelled of antiseptic and coffee, and somewhere down the hall a monitor beeped steadily, too steadily, like a countdown she wasn't ready for. She clutched the envelope in both hands, as if Margaret's final words were the only thing keeping her upright. Richard hurried beside her, guiding her with a firm hand at her back. The nurse who had met them outside walked quickly ahead, weaving through wheelchairs and late-night visitors. "She's conscious," the nurse said, "but she's weak. You'll need to keep the conversation short." Evelyn's heart pounded. "Is she in pain?" "She's stable for the moment," the nurse said gently. "But she's emotionally distressed. Whatever she wants to tell you, it's important." Evelyn swallowed hard. Her palms were damp around the envelope. "I'll listen," she whispered. "I'm ready." Richard glanced down at her trembling fingers. "Remember," he murmured, "this is the moment your past begins to make sense." They reached a set of double doors leading to the intensive wing. A sign above read, "Critical Care." The words pressed into Evelyn's chest like a weight. As the nurse swiped her badge to unlock the doors, Evelyn tried to steady her breathing. She had imagined reconciling with her sister one day, maybe in a quiet kitchen, maybe at a family gathering where apologies flowed easily. She hadn't imagined learning the truth like this, one generation removed, in a cold hospital where time felt thinner. The nurse gestured them forward. "She's right in here." They entered a dim room bathed in soft blue monitor lights. Machines hummed quietly, a rhythm of fragile life, and there, propped on pillows, pale but alert, lay Anna. Evelyn stopped short. Her niece looked so much like Margaret it hurt. The same dark eyes, the same quiet strength, the same way her hands folded nervously when emotion threatened to spill over. Anna lifted her head weakly. "Aunt Evelyn," hearing her name spoken so softly, so tenderly, hit Evelyn like a wave. She forced herself to nod. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here." Anna's chin trembled. "I didn't think you would come." Evelyn stepped closer, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "I came as soon as Richard found me." Anna looked at Richard with gratitude. "Thank you for bringing her." "I just did what Margaret asked me to," he said gently. Evelyn reached the bedside and took Anna's hand. It was warm, but fragile, like a memory you're afraid will slip away if you hold it too tightly. "I should have called you years ago," Anna whispered. "Mom didn't tell me everything until she was dying." Evelyn felt her breath catch. "She told you about the fight?" Anna nodded. "And the reason behind it?" Evelyn's pulse quickened. "Reason?" Anna closed her eyes as if the truth cost energy she didn't have. "Aunt Evelyn, the night you left, it wasn't your fault." Evelyn's fingers tightened around Anna's hand. "Anna, I yelled at her. I walked out. I left you both." "That's not what happened," Anna whispered. "That's what you believed. It's what she let you believe." Evelyn shook her head. Her voice cracked. "Why would she do that? Why would she let us lose 15 years? Anna turned her head slightly, tears spilling over her lashes. "Because she was protecting you." "Protecting me?" Evelyn repeated. "From what?" Anna swallowed. "From the truth." Evelyn clutched the envelope to her chest. "She wrote it in here, didn't she?" Anna nodded. "Yes, everything. The truth about that night. The truth about your childhood. The truth about what she kept hidden from you for decades." Richard stepped closer. "Evelyn, whatever's inside that letter, you deserve to hear it." Evelyn felt dizzy, the fluorescent lights blurring. "I don't understand. What was she protecting me from?" Anna looked up at her, eyes wide with pain. "Mom spent her life shielding you from someone you trusted, someone who should have protected you both." Evelyn felt her stomach twist. "Who?" Anna hesitated, breath shallow, voice trembling like a flame in wind. "Aunt Evelyn. The night you walked out, you thought she pushed you away because of the argument." "Yes," Evelyn whispered, "because she said she didn't need me anymore." Anna shook her head slowly. That wasn't why. She said those words to stop you from coming back that night. Why? Evelyn pressed, voice rising with desperation. Why wouldn't she let me come back? Anna took a weak breath, then whispered the sentence that made Evelyn's knees buckle. Because the person who hurt her was planning to hurt you too. Evelyn froze. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. That can't be true. Anna's lips trembled. It is. And Mom spent 15 years making sure he could never reach you. Evelyn felt the room spin. Her fingers loosened. The envelope nearly slipped from her hands. Richard steadied her. Evelyn, he whispered, you don't have to open it alone. But Evelyn couldn't take her eyes off Anna. Who? She demanded. Who is she protecting me from? Anna opened her mouth. The truth right there, ready to break everything open. But suddenly the monitors beside her erupted in a burst of shrill, panicked beeping. Anna gasped. Her body arched. Her hand slipped from Evelyn's grip. Nurses flooded the room. Code Blue! Room 314! A doctor rushed in. Ma'am, you need to step back. But Evelyn stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe, as the truth hovered over her like a ghost ready to finally speak. Richard grabbed her shoulders and pulled her away. Evelyn watched in horror as the medical team fought to stabilize Anna. One nurse pressed a hand to her chest. Another prepared the crash cart. The doctor barked commands. Evelyn's whisper filled the chaotic room. Please, not before she tells me. And just as a nurse charged the defibrillator paddles, Anna's eyes snapped open for a split second, just long enough for her to say one final broken word, Grandpa, before the monitors flatlined. For a moment, the entire room fell into a kind of suspended silence, a silence so heavy it pressed against Evelyn's ears, a silence so sharp it felt like it sliced straight through her chest. Grandpa! The word echoed like a scream inside her mind. Her legs nearly gave out. Richard caught her just before she collapsed. No, Evelyn whispered. No, she didn't mean that. She couldn't have meant that. But Anna's eyes had been clear, terrified, pleading, truth spilling out in her final living breath. The medical team continued to work over the still fragile body. A nurse performed chest compressions. Another scanned the monitors. A doctor called for a second dose of epinephrine. But Evelyn barely heard any of it. Her world had narrowed to one impossible, unthinkable, sickening revelation. She staggered backward until her shoulder hit the wall. Grandpa? She choked. My grandfather never touched her. He couldn't. Her voice shattered. Because deep down, in a part of herself she had buried so deep it almost didn't have her name anymore, she remembered. The nights Margaret never let her sleep alone. The times she'd wake to find her older sister sitting on the floor beside her bed, watching the door, guarding it, guarding her. Richard grabbed her hands. Evelyn, breathe, look at me. She couldn't. Her gaze drifted, unfocused, to the window where rain streaked down like tears. I thought she just didn't want me there, Evelyn whispered. I thought she pushed me away because she was angry. Richard shook his head gently. She pushed you away so you wouldn't walk into the same danger she grew up fighting alone. A sob tore from Evelyn's chest, a sound pulled from years of misunderstood distance, of unanswered questions, of a childhood she thought she remembered correctly, but now realized she didn't understand at all. But why didn't she tell me? Evelyn cried. Why didn't she say anything? Why let me live thinking I abandoned her? A nurse looked back from the bedside. Her expression softened. Some people carry their pain alone to protect the ones they love. Evelyn pressed her hand to her mouth, trembling. Anna's final words still pulsed inside her skull. Grandpa. She felt sick, cold, lost. Richard pulled her into his chest. Evelyn, whatever Margaret protected you from, she succeeded. You're safe. You've always been safe because she made sure of it. But at what cost? Evelyn sobbed into his coat. At the cost of losing her. At the cost of losing 15 years with her daughter. At the cost of losing myself. The crash of the defibrillator paddles made her flinch. Clear! A doctor shouted. Anna's body jerked. The monitor flatlined again. Evelyn's tears blurred the scene. No, Please." A nurse glanced toward her, eyes soft with sorrow. "We're still trying." Richard squeezed her shoulder. "You should sit," he said softly. But Evelyn didn't move, couldn't move. Her feet were rooted to the tile floor as if the truth had fused her to the moment. Her voice trembled as she finally whispered, "If he hurt Margaret, if he tried to hurt me." She swallowed hard. "That means Mom knew." Richard froze. The weight of that truth slammed into both of them. Evelyn pressed a shaking hand against her forehead. "She sent us to live with him some weekends. I always thought she needed help because she was working double shifts. But what if she knew? What if she suspected?" Richard's eyes softened. People back then had fewer places to turn. Sometimes they chose the wrong safety because they didn't have another one. Evelyn stepped back from him. Her world was cracking open in layers. "My own mother," she whispered. "She might have known." Richard didn't deny it. He didn't try to soften the blow. He simply stood beside her, steady, unflinching, letting her face what she had to face. The doctor called out for another round of compressions. One nurse whispered urgently into the charged nurse's ear. Another prepared the crash cart again. But Evelyn's focus was locked on the doorway, because she felt it before she heard it. A presence, a familiar one that made the hairs on her arms rise. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Slow, uneven, dragging, like someone old but determined. Richard turned. His face paled. "No," he whispered. "Not here. Not now." Evelyn looked up, and there, leaning on a cane, rain dripping from his coat, eyes sharp despite his age, stood her grandfather. The man she had spent her life believing was stern but kind. The man who had tucked her into bed. The man who had given her Christmas gifts and taught her to ride a bike. The man Anna had just named with her last breath. He stepped into the doorway of the hospital room, his presence filling every corner like a shadow returning to claim its name. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low, steady, rehearsed. "We need to talk." Evelyn felt the world tilt as her grandfather stepped into the doorway. For a heartbeat, the room held two versions of him at once. The gentle man she had adored as a child, and the dark truth Anna had spoken with her dying breath. He stood there wearing the same calm expression he had worn her entire life, an expression that had once brought comfort. Now it brought dread. Richard immediately stepped in front of Evelyn. "Turn around," he warned, voice low and sharp. "Now is not the time. You don't belong here." Her grandfather lifted one eyebrow, unimpressed. "I have as much right to be here as any of you. She's my granddaughter." Evelyn felt her knees shake. Granddaughter. The word tasted poisoned now. She shook her head slowly. "Why are you here?" "To check on my family," he replied, as if the question insulted him. His tone was too smooth, too practiced. The tone of a man who had dodged accountability his entire life. Something inside Evelyn snapped into place, a clarity that had been waiting years to rise. "No," she said softly. "That's not why you came." His jaw tightened, just barely, but enough for Evelyn to see the truth beneath the mask. "For years," she said, her voice trembling but growing stronger with each syllable, "I thought Margaret pushed me away because she didn't love me anymore." Her grandfather's eyes flickered. A warning. Evelyn took one step toward him. Richard remained close, ready to intervene. "But she wasn't pushing me away," Evelyn continued. "She was shielding me." A muscle in her grandfather's cheek twitched. Anna's last word, "Grandpa," echoed through the room like a verdict. "You hurt her," Evelyn whispered. "You hurt Margaret." His eyes hardened. "I don't know what lies that girl told you." "You hurt her," Evelyn said again, louder now. "And you would have hurt me too." He took a slow breath. "A girl's memory is unreliable. You were both confused, emotional." Richard stepped closer, fury burning in his eyes. "Don't you dare gaslight her." A nearby nurse glanced over her shoulder, sensing the tension, but didn't intervene. She saw the truth in Evelyn's face, and the danger in the man before her. Her grandfather leaned forward, voice dangerously low. "You're too old to cling to fairy tales about villains and heroes. Life is complicated. Humans are flawed. Those words, once used to excuse his sternness, now exposed the rot beneath his calm exterior. Evelyn straightened her spine. "No," she said quietly. "Life is complicated, but what you did was not." He opened his mouth. She raised a hand, and for the first time in her life, he fell silent. "You stole my childhood," Evelyn whispered. "You stole Margaret's peace. You broke our family, and you let me carry guilt for walking away from her, when it was you she was protecting me from." Her grandfather's eyes flashed with something dark, anger or frustration or fear, and Evelyn suddenly saw how small he truly was beneath the shadow he had cast. "I won't let you decide my story anymore," she said, "and I won't let you haunt Margaret's memory." Richard stepped beside her, solid and steady. "You should leave," he told the older man, "before security is called." For the first time, her grandfather hesitated, not out of remorse, but because he realized he had lost control. "You're making a mistake," he murmured. "One day you'll see that." Evelyn met his gaze with a calm she never thought she would feel again. "I already see clearly," she said, "and for the first time in my life I'm safe." He let out a tight breath, turned, and walked away. His footsteps echoed down the hallway, each one growing softer, smaller, less significant. When he finally disappeared around the corner, Evelyn's body sagged, and Richard wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "It's over," he whispered, but Evelyn shook her head. "No," she said softly. "It's beginning." She stepped back into Anna's room. The machines had gone silent. The medical team had stepped out. A blanket was pulled gently over Anna's still body. Evelyn placed a trembling hand on her niece's shoulder. "You saved me," she whispered, "and you saved Margaret's truth." She leaned down and kissed Anna's forehead. "I will carry you both with me." She opened the envelope at last. Margaret's handwriting flowed across the page. A confession, a story, a warning, a love letter all at once. Evelyn read every word, tears falling but steady, until she reached the final line. "Live free, my sister. You deserve a life untouched by him. You deserve everything I couldn't have." Evelyn pressed the letter to her heart. Her grief was deep, but it was no longer tangled in confusion. Now it had purpose. Now it had truth. And truth, she realized, was its own kind of freedom. Richard touched her hand. "Where do you want to go?" Evelyn looked toward the exit, toward the world waiting outside, toward a life no longer defined by shadows or silence. "Home," she whispered, "but not the place I came from." Richard nodded. "Then let's build you a new one." And together they stepped out of the hospital, into the cool, quiet air of a world that no longer frightened her. A world where she finally understood her story, her worth, and the love she was still capable of receiving. It wasn't the ending she expected, but it was the beginning she needed.